recording. Welcome to episode 1 of Power BI Nibbles. Use parameters. I'm Alan Farner, and I am quite fond of Power BI. And one of the reasons I am quite fond of Power BI is because Microsoft is constantly enhancing it. I attended a summit today where they told about a whole bunch of neat stuff that they're going to do. So things change, and I'm also human, so use my advice at your own risk. And seriously, don't sue me. If a wormhole were to open a path to an alternate universe and a supervillain came and wiped all your data, trashed your computers, and then stole your Starbucks mocha cookie crumble frappuccino, it's on you. It's on you. Also, I only speak for myself, not my employers. So if you look them up, don't blame them. If where you're watching this, there might be some kind of like button or subscribe button, or maybe something to turn on notifications, please consider doing so. It is proven protection against those alternate universe supervillains. Trust me. You will be able to find these videos on youtube.dataguy.me, and you can see the main URL. Please visit the main site too. Also, they're going to be on my Nibbles Wiki. All my Power BI tutorials, written and video, will be up there. It's starting just now. Nibbles.wiki is the URL. Have fun. Experiment. You can see I like this stuff. Are you ready? Well, let's go. Here, I got to switch things around real quick, and then we'll look together. Okay, can you see my screen? We're going to use a data set nicely provided by the CDC, and I think this has to do with positive, where they test to see if you have it, brain cramp, positive. And let me scroll down here, show you guys this. One thing I like about this data set is, notice it has, just a second here. Excuse me, my Diet Pepsi's fighting back. It's got a little like data dictionary and stuff. It's got a whole bunch of records, which I didn't realize until it was taking so long to download. You know, when it got past a gigabyte, then 2 gigabytes, so it's over 3 gigabytes. Then I realized I had a lot of records, but this is a nice data set, and I will paste this. Go ahead and paste it in the description. But let's go ahead and get the data. So so when we do parameters, I always do parameters for the source data directory, whether it is local or up, say, on SharePoint, and for the file names. What I do is I get the data, and then I do replacements. So let's go ahead and get the data. Give it a second here. It's not a slow computer I have, but it's not super fast either. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and connect. I'm going to grab it right here, open it up. Give it a second. So it's going to bring up an interface. It's going to look like normal. It's data. This is CSV. I don't just load, because what happens when you load, it's going to have to get chugged through all the data. There's probably something you're going to want to do with your data. You at least want to check the types that it's guessed and stuff like that. There's a decent chance you get a lot of fields it's not going to guess them all correctly. So I recommend transform data. Something else I recommend when it comes up is don't go with the default name that they gave you for the query. I personally always change my query names to something underscore query. So like COVID query, right? And part of the reason I do it is, what's really neat about Power Query, it's in Excel too. And in Excel, you start using Visual Basic for applications. It's nice to have things named uniquely, and so that you can tell what you're dealing with. Same kind of thing with this. I call queries queries. If I make a table in the data model, I call it underscore table. And so that's what I do. Now, if you look at this, we're not going to worry too much about types. But if you look along here, you can see they got the types, and they're fine. If you don't see this formula bar, go to View, and it's this little box here. It's going to look like this. Just a second here. I don't know why it's. Go ahead and check that again. Go ahead. That's what it looks like without it. So if you don't see it, click on that. You want the formula bar. It gives you some easy ways to look at what's happening and to make some adjustments. And what we want to do is, let's look at this. Do you think that if you had this file on your laptop or computer or whatever, that it would have that path? It's very unlikely. Very unlikely. As a matter of fact, even if you had a more normal location, your home directory is not the same as your coworker's home directory. It's not going to be the same. So the reality is anytime you have a path and something like this, it is a support nightmare. Somebody else wants to use it, they got to, and let's say you have 10 queries, a bunch of different files, they got to go change the path in 10 queries, and then they give it back to you and you get to do it too. But you might move it. You might say, hey, you know what, I want to have a development one and a quote unquote production one, and they may not have the same source directories, right? Or the same files for that matter. You might have a smaller file. So leaving it hardwired like this does not work out well. Parameters will help make that a lot easier. Also, you might want to put on SharePoint Online, okay? But let's go ahead and parameterize this. Now, if you come back over here to Home, you can hit the down arrow and you can say New Parameter. I always, just understand, anytime there's a big button, it has a default thing. With this one, I use the default. I bring up the interface and I go New, and there are two that I always do, Source, Data, dir. I could copy it from that formula bar, but generally I do it this way. Let me just go ahead and come here. I'm going to go, whoops, go like that. I'm going to copy it, come back over here to the parameter. I'm going to say that it is type text, and I'm going to paste it here. Got that? Now I always put the final slant on it. This is why, if this were like Perl or Python, I could have a quick little thing check and say, is there a slant on the end? If not, slap it on there. It is not that simple to do that, okay? So in Power BI, that is. I don't know if you guys can see this. Can you see like a, yeah, I've got this pop-up, in-game HUD available. I don't know what it means. That's what I get for using a gaming laptop for development. And then the other thing that you need, of course, is the file name. And you could leave it hardwired, but again, yeah, it's less likely that you're going to change the file name, but you could. So doing a parameter is just a better idea. So I'll come back over here, get a new one. We'll call this COVID data file. And just something I would suggest is this. With your file names, directory names, gotta admit, I think spaces are a bit better in directory names, just the way the brain works. But with file names, just use underscores. Don't put spaces and stuff. Why? I mentioned before, what if you want to move your local file up on SharePoint? It works out awesome. In SharePoint, if you have a file name, it's going to have percentages in it, right? It will, yes. So, well, I'm sorry, percentage 20s. What'll happen is a space will become a percentage 20 or something like that. So you don't want funky things in file names. And to be honest, don't put spaces in almost anything that you're going to use in programming. Let me come back over here real quick. So like this is COVID query. Don't put COVID space query because what happens, give you an idea, look at Advanced Editor, you'll play with it sometime. If you start doing stuff like that, well, you won't see it here, but take a look at what happens when you have spaces and names, right? Whereas source doesn't need it because, hey, it's just a single word. So as a whole, especially like with field names, query names, and all those type of things, just use underscores. Basically use letters, numbers, dashes, and underscores, and leave it at that. And trust me, there are other things like 24.4 million records. This data up in Microsoft SQL, right? You don't want a name in here from the file that you can't have as a field in SQL, a field name in SQL. Yes, you can have spaces, but the other thing I told you about. So don't do that. Okay, so now we got our two things. Let's come back up here to source, and I'm going to highlight this right here. Get rid of the hardwired version, clunk, source, data, oops, dir, I cannot type, and ampersand meaning concatenate, COVID, as I continue, I'm going to blame it on the Bluetooth keyboard, data file. Let's go ahead and check. Did you see that? Did you see that? It didn't break. Isn't it awesome? I can move it all around. As a matter of fact, let's just go ahead and prove that. Let's come back over here, and we're going to Control X that, go up to this directory, go like this. And by the way, notice that 3.3, 3.4 gigabytes. Come here. If I go refresh preview, it's going to say, oh my gosh, it's not there. I can't find it. Well, no problem. Now, again, I normally use this button, but I want to show you, you can come here and go like this instead. We moved it. I could go copy again, but I know that I moved it right there. Click outside it. And notice everything's hunky-dory again. Do you get the point? A couple other big little, it's tired. It's getting late here. I'm tired. If you right click this, you'll see that it has enable load. Enable load means put on the data model. I used to always stick them in the data model because, you know, what if I need it? That's just handy. The problem is in Power BI, if you look over on your main screen over here, I'm not going to click. Well, actually, I can bring it up, I think. If we had any queries, they'd be along here. Well, if you enable load on a parameter, it's going to be listed here too. So let's say I have 12 parameters and 2 queries. You're going to have 14 lines, and you're going to have to find something. And it's just messy. So I changed. Only load them if you need to. And the only times generally I need to load them is, let's say that I'm going to put them in a card visual or something like that. So if you're going to put them in visuals, or you're going to do a calculated field, you would want to load it. So give an idea of a calculated field. Let's say you have a case where your director says, hey, I want, if it's over 95%, I want it to show as red. Well, as of when I'm recording this, you can't use parameters in conditional formatting, but you can use it in a calculated column. So you could create a state column, numeric state column, and you could say, if this calculation comes up over 95%, for this record, it is true, or it's 1, like 1 for red, 2 for yellow, 3 for green. Then you could use that in a conditional formatting. And the nice thing about using a parameter is he comes back and says, you know, as I think about it, if it's over 90%, it should be red. If it's over 90%, well, you don't have to look in the code, try to figure out where you did things like that. You just go to the parameter and say, oh, red threshold equals, instead of 0.95, 0.9. So I think you get the point. I think you get the point. Let me check my notes here. Make sure I touched on everything I wanted to. Connect normally first, then add parameters. Do at least the source directory and the file name. Also, if you have groups of files and subdirectories, I will create parameters for subdirectories. So let's say you have a bunch of app files and a bunch of regional files. You might have a subdirectory called app files and a subdirectory called regional files. And then you can build them in. And instead of having the 2 pieces like this, coming back here, you'd have 3 pieces with ampersands. Talked about putting the slash at the end. Basically, don't use spaces. Avoid spaces. I'm not saying never use spaces, but like field names and stuff like that, don't use spaces. And don't use any other funky characters and field names. And that's basically it. Let me bring this back over to me. See if I can do this right. Let me check something else here. Am I showing? I am showing again. So hopefully, see, this is like the 4th recording tonight. Just saying I'm getting used to, I don't want to blame the program, it's me. So first 2 didn't have sound because there was something funky going on. Finally got sound. There was an echo. So this time, hopefully, after when you're listening to this, there's no echo and stuff. Either that or you'll see here. I've got my Power BI hat here, but you can see I don't have much more hair to donate here. Any comments? Hey, please put them. Put them underneath the description or wherever it shows up. I'm interested. If I can help you, reach out. This is part of the reason I love Power BI and the people in it. We want to help. They help us. And I can promise you, we will learn together. If I help you with something, I learn something myself. So don't hesitate to ask me to help. And what else would you like to see recordings on? Parameters. I know this has gone on a bit. Parameters are, a bit simple, but you can do things. I tell people with Power BI, think like a developer, but with the extra operational knowledge that you have. That's your advantage over a developer when you're working with Power BI. That's basically it. Thank you for watching again. If there happens to be a like button subscribe button or notification button, please go ahead, press those buttons, and I promise this will get slicker, not way slick. I don't like slick videos, to be honest, but it will get slicker as I get past the, like, why am I always washed out? I mean, it's just one light right there, one light right there. Oh, yeah, and you can see if I go like this, then things get a little better. But please subscribe and stuff, and let me know what you think. I'll see you again with the next nibble, next Power BI nibble.